So you wanted to learn more about MrBeast, huh?
The YouTube guy.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he's everywhere these days. Right?
Seriously, it's like you can't escape him.
So we decided to dig a little deeper.
Get past the surface.
Yeah, and see what's really going on.
I mean, is he just this generous guy giving away millions?
Or is there something else going on?
Something a bit more calculated, maybe.
So we found this academic paper.
Oh, yeah, I read that one. It's,
Power Dynamics and Influence. A case study on MrBeast Enterprises.
catchy title.
It's on ResearchGate if you want to check it out.
And it really gets into some fascinating stuff about his whole operation.
Like how he built this empire from the ground up.
And the impact he's having on viewers.
Okay, so first things first, this paper talks about MrBeast's business model.
Right, and they make this argument that his success is all built on this thing called the attention economy.
The attention economy. Okay, so that sounds kind of complicated.
It's actually not that complex.
Hmm.
I mean, think about it. Have you ever gotten, like, totally sucked into watching one of his videos?
Oh, yeah, totally. Even when you know it's kind of manipulative, like you just have to see what happens next.
Exactly. That's the attention economy at work.
So basically, MrBeast is like a master of grabbing and holding our attention.
You got it.
But how does he do it?
Well, he's figured out how to tap into those basic human instincts.
Those psychological needs we all have, like curiosity
Yeah, and our desire for instant gratification.
and maybe a little bit of FOMO, fear of missing out.
Totally. Remember that early video where he just counted to 100,000?
Yeah, I remember thinking, why am I watching this?
Mm-hmm.
But I couldn't stop.
It was so simple, but it kept people glued to their screens.
So that was like an early example of how he understood how to keep people watching.
Exactly. And since then, he's just taken that concept and scaled it up massively.
Like those crazy giveaways and those over-the-top challenges.
Don't forget the philanthropy, too.
Right. Team trees, team seas. It's all designed to grab our attention.
But the paper then dives into this whole philanthropy thing.
Okay, yeah, because there's definitely some debate about whether it's all genuine right.
Exactly.
I mean, on one hand, they've planted millions of trees,
And cleaned up tons of plastic from the ocean.
which is amazing.
Yeah.
But then there's this other side.
The cynical view.
Yeah, are these acts truly altruistic?
Or are they just clever marketing ploys?
Like a way to boost his image and deflect criticism.
Right. And it's a tough question to answer.
I mean, is it possible for someone to be both super successful and genuinely charitable?
That's what the paper wants us to grapple with. It doesn't give us a clear answer.
It's like they're saying, hey, you decide.
Exactly. Is it okay if his philanthropy is strategic?
As long as the outcome is positive.
Tough questions, right?
So we've got the attention-grabbing content and the potentially calculated philanthropy. What else does this paper dig into?
Well, it gets pretty interesting when they start analyzing MrBeast's leadership style.
Oh, really?
They even bring up this whole dark triad thing.
The dark triad. Okay, wait, now hold on. Are we comparing MrBeast to, like, a supervillain here?
Not exactly. It's not that dramatic.
Okay, good, because that would be a bit much.
But they are using these personality frameworks to understand his leadership style.
So they're not, like, diagnosing him with anything?
No, not at all. But they are pointing out some patterns in his behavior that could be a little concerning.
Like what?
Well, they mention his extreme ambition and his need for control. You could see those as signs of narcissism.
Oh, okay, I see where they're going with that.
And then there's his willingness to push boundaries sometimes, even if it means putting others at risk.
That sounds a little psychopathic.
Right. It's like there's this fine line between being a daring innovator and being reckless with people's well-being.
Yeah, I can see that. And that brings us to the really troubling part of this whole deep dive.
The allegations from that former employee Dogpack 404.
Yeah, this guy claims that MrBeast Enterprises is a toxic and manipulative work environment.
And those claims are pretty disturbing.
Like employees being pressured to constantly appear happy and enthusiastic.
Even when they're feeling burnt out and exploited.
Yeah, all to maintain that perfect MrBeast brand image.
It really makes you wonder what's going on behind the scenes, right?
Is it all just a facade?
That's a question we'll have to explore further in the next part of our deep dive.
So we were talking about those allegations of a toxic work environment, right?
Yeah, that whole Dogpack 404 situation.
It's kind of disturbing when you think about it.
It definitely raises some red flags.
Like, how much pressure are these employees under?
I mean, think about it. They're constantly having to churn out viral content.
And probably working insane hours to meet those crazy deadlines.
It sounds exhausting.
Yeah, totally.
Right.
And it's not just the physical toll either, right?
Oh, definitely. The emotional labor involved in that kind of environment.
Having to be on all the time.
Uh,
Always upbeat and positive.
Even if you're feeling completely drained and burnt out?
That can't be healthy.
Not at all. And then you add in those allegations of manipulation and gaslighting.
Yeah, that's where things get really messed up.
Being made to feel like your concerns aren't valid.
Like you're overreacting or imagining things.
Classic manipulation tactics.
The kind of stuff that makes you question your own sanity.
Exactly. And it makes it so much harder to speak up about mistreatment.
It's like this crazy disconnect, right?
Totally.
On one hand, you have this company that's all about positivity and generosity.
Making the world a better place.
But behind the scenes, it's allegedly a whole different story.
Yeah. And that's what the paper is trying to highlight.
This idea that things aren't always what they seem.
Like there could be this dark underbelly to the things we enjoy.
The entertainment we consume.
Yeah.
The brands we support.
It's a bit unsettling when you think about it.
So the paper delves into how MrBeast might be using those dark triad traits we talked about to manage his employees.
Right. They break it down into these different bases of power.
Okay, remind me what those are again.
So first you've got reward power, which is pretty standard in any workplace.
Like giving bonuses and promotions to motivate employees.
Great. But the paper suggests that MrBeast might be taking it to an extreme.
How so?
Creating this hyper-competitive environment where everyone is constantly vying for his approval.
Like they're fighting for scraps instead of working together.
Yeah, it creates this constant pressure to outperform each other.
And then there's coercive power, which is a lot more troubling.
Definitely. That's using punishment or threats to keep people in line.
The paper actually gives some examples of this, right?
Yeah, like employees being publicly humiliated or threatened with losing their jobs.
If they don't meet his expectations.
Exactly. It fosters this culture of fear and silence.
Where people are afraid to speak up or challenge him.
It's a pretty messed up dynamic.
Yeah, it sounds like a high-stakes game with huge rewards, but also terrifying consequences.
Exactly. And then on top of that, you've got referent power.
Referent power.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't remember that one.
That's the power that comes from being liked and admired.
Which MrBeast definitely has a lot of.
Tons. Millions of fans adore him.
So basically, employees might feel pressured to go along with whatever he wants just because they don't want to disappoint him.
Right, or lose his favor. It creates this really unhealthy power imbalance.
This whole thing is giving me a totally different perspective on MrBeast and his whole empire.
It's like we're peeling back the layers of this happy-go-lucky brand and finding some pretty dark stuff underneath.
And that's what this paper is all about, right?
Challenging our assumptions, making us think critically about the things we consume.
So it's not just about MrBeast, it's about the whole system.
Exactly. But let's shift gears for a second.
Okay.
The paper also takes a broader look at the societal impact of MrBeast's content.
And they bring up this concept called social learning theory.
Have you heard of that one?
I think so. Like the idea that people learn by observing others, right?
You got it.
Yeah.
So the paper is basically arguing that MrBeast's videos could be influencing his viewers
Especially younger ones.
to adopt certain values and behaviors.
Like what?
Well, think about those challenges where people have to endure all kinds of crazy stuff for money.
Yeah, those are intense.
The paper argues that this could normalize the idea that personal well-being is less important than financial gain.
Whoa. I never thought about it that way.
Right. It makes you wonder what kind of message that sends to young people.
Is it okay to suffer as long as you get rich in the end?
These are big questions. And the paper doesn't pretend to have all the answers.
But it definitely gets you thinking.
Exactly. It's about sparking a conversation and considering the potential unintended consequences of this type of content.
Okay, so before we get too deep into that rabbit hole, let's go back to something else the paper mentioned.
What's that?
That concept of simulacra. It sounded pretty complex.
Oh yeah, that one's a bit of a mind bender.
Can you break it down for me?
Sure. So basically simulacra are copies of things that don't have an original.
Like a copy of a copy.
Kind of. They're simulations of reality that become so pervasive they start to replace the real thing.
So are they saying that MrBeast's videos are fake? Like the challenges aren't real or the reactions are staged?
Not necessarily. It's more about the blurring of lines between what's authentic and what's manufactured.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get it.
Think about reality TV. We all know it's heavily edited and manipulated.
But we still get sucked into the drama.
Exactly. It's like we're willing to suspend our disbelief and buy into this constructed reality.
Even though we know it's not entirely genuine.
Right. And that's where things get interesting.
How so?
Because when we get too used to these simulacra,
We might start losing our ability to distinguish between what's real and what's fake.
and that can have some pretty serious consequences for how we see the world.
Whoa, okay, that's a little scary.
Right. So the paper is raising the question of whether MrBeast's content
Even though it's entertaining.
could be he contributing to this erosion of our sense of reality?
And that's especially concerning because he has such a massive young audience.
Exactly. Are we teaching them to be critical thinkers, or are we just blurring the lines between reality and entertainment?
Okay, my brain is officially fried. This is heavy stuff.
I know, right? It's a lot to process.
But the good news is, the paper doesn't just leave us hanging.
Right. They actually offer some recommendations for how to navigate this whole crazy world of online content.
Okay, I'm all ears. What do they
Yeah.
suggest? Okay, so last time we were talking about how MrBeast's content could be blurring the lines between reality and entertainment.
Right. And it's kind of scary when you think about the implications.
Like, are we all just living in a simulation?
Well, not quite. But the paper does offer some ways to deal with this whole situation.
Okay, because I need some hope here.
They emphasize the importance of something called media literacy.
Media literacy.
Mm.
Okay, I've heard that term, but what does it actually mean?
Basically, it's the ability to think critically about media messages.
So it's not just like passively absorbing whatever we see and hear,
No, it's about analyzing it, understanding the techniques being used to persuade us.
and spotting those hidden agendas.
Exactly. And it's super important these days with all the social media and influencer stuff,
Because we're bombarded with messages all the time.
trying to grab our attention and influence our choices.
So basically, we need to become, like, media detectives.
I like that. We need to be asking questions like, who made this? Why? What are they trying to get me to believe?
So it's about being skeptical
Mm-hmm.
and not taking everything at face value.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. But how do we actually become more media literate?
Well, it's about developing good habits, paying attention to the sources of information.
Looking for evidence and considering different perspectives.
And don't be afraid to challenge the things you see and hear.
So it's like a constant process of questioning and evaluating.
Exactly. And the more we practice those skills, the better equipped we'll be to navigate this crazy online world.
So that's for us as viewers.
Yeah.
But what about the content creators themselves?
Oh, they have a responsibility too. The paper talks a lot about transparency and accountability.
Like being honest with their audiences and disclosing any conflicts of interest.
Right, and not exploiting vulnerable people for views or profit.
So basically using their platform for good.
Exactly.
Uh,
Recognizing that they have power and influence and using it responsibly.
Okay, so after all this back and forth, is MrBeast a villain? A hero? A genius businessman?
Or a master manipulator.
It's hard to say, right?
The paper doesn't give us a simple answer.
It lays out all the different perspectives.
But ultimately, it's up to each of us to decide what we think.
This whole deep dive has been a wild ride.
It really has.
We started with this one YouTuber and ended up exploring these huge questions about media power and ethics.
And that's what makes research so fascinating, right?
It can lead you down unexpected paths.
And challenge you to think differently about the world.
So what's the big takeaway from all of this?
I think the most important thing is to remember that we all have a role to play in shaping the future of digital media.
By being informed and critical.
And by demanding better from the content we consume and the creators we support.
Well said. That's a wrap on our MrBeast deep dive. Thanks for joining us. And remember, keep those detective hats on.